Welcome to the 106th broadcast of the T Rose Show. This is your host, Keith. I got John on the call with us.
Good morning, folks. I hope you enjoy this one.
I have a feeling they're going to. Okay, everybody that's listening to this program, we don't normally say this, but you need to listen very carefully because you're about to get the end show. You're about to understand how the system is set up to, when they say it's rigged, we're going to explain why it's rigged and how it's rigged. Okay, and once you understand it, you'll get the whole gist of it, and then you'll be able to understand terms and understand everything you're looking at and everything that's going on in the courtroom. Okay, and when they say the system is rigged, it is definitely rigged against you. So like always, I'm going to go ahead and share screens, and we'll get started. First, I'm going to tell you about a story that came up, and it was kind of an emergency thing, and I said, here's what happened today. This is what we got a couple of days ago. This was a case about a woman that got into a fight with her husband, and they ended up. Her husband called the cops. He basically started it, and he called the cops to come end it. That's typical of today's youth. They make a mess, they call a cop, and they want the cop to come and fix it for them. Okay, always the state to come in and fix things for them. So here's what happened. It says, we get to the courthouse. The prosecutor asks Sarah's husband if he can speak to him privately. They exit the courtroom. The gist of the conversation was the prosecutor intended to continue with the bench trial. He would think about reducing the charge from assault to disorderly conduct with a $300 fine. Husband tells prosecutor he didn't think Sarah would accept any plea bargain. Judge enters courtroom, nice to other litigants except Sarah. He calls Sarah's case. Prosecutor brings up Sarah's affidavit. Judge sternly states, we have jurisdiction in the story. Sarah makes a statement. A trustee of the person is here, and the beneficiary has already been named. Prosecutor then refers back to Sarah's affidavit, calling it a motion making reference to jurisdiction. The prosecutor did a 180. The judge asked the prosecutor, are we ready to proceed with trial? The prosecutor said, no, we are requesting a dismissal at this time. Judge tells Sarah, case dismissed, you are free to go. After Sarah's husband walks out of the courtroom, before Sarah and myself, the prosecutor apologized to her husband and said he would not be refiling any new charges against Sarah. So Sarah stated the trustee of the person is supposed to be the other is here, and the beneficiary has already been named. So I'm going to explain to you how the court system operates, how we see it, and then a lot of this is going to make sense to everyone. Prosecutor has a separate case number on each case. We've noticed this in the T Rose show a long time ago, actually a couple of times. Notice of termination of trust created under that number should do the trick. So now, here's another side to this is the prosecutor is representing the investors of the bond created in the case, making the investors the beneficiary of the trust created by the case filing. Not under the case itself, but under his case number. Charges are filed. Allegedly, a commercial promise has been broken. Trustee of personal trust is charged. Bond is created. Investors are procured, thereby creating another trust with a separate trustee, prosecutor, and beneficiaries, investors, without the knowledge of the trustee of the personal trust, that being you under the Internal Revenue Trust. And then I just put in there possible co-trustee relationship created by between you and the prosecutor with the same beneficiaries, investors. So this is all explained under the Trust Indenture Act of 1939, connected to the 1933 Securities Act. All proceeds of the case are gifted to the beneficiaries under accepting gifts to reduce public debt, and all players get their cut of the action under the prosecutor's case number. a double booking system. The trustee of the personal trust is fleeced. Possible co-beneficiaries are Bank of New York and the tripartite, meaning Washington, Crown, and Vatican. All cases are trustee versus trustee, and both trustees were created by the same banker. Person is trafficked offshore, thereby creating the personal trust and trustee. Impossible commercial promise created by the banker through legislation and indentured upon the personal trust through voters registration. Liability created against the personal trust sued by the banker for violation of the commercial obligation in the creditor's court, represented by the prosecutor's case number. Court case number is personal trust case number. So two separate case numbers, possible co-trustee existence to create joinder. All proceeds from the case are accepted as a gift through the DOJ and U.S. Treasury to reduce public debt created by the banker, created a credit accepted and spent by U.S. Congress that benefits the banker, wherein the impossible commercial obligations are created. It's all started by the New Deal from 1776 to fund the world communist revolution. That would be Allen Weishaupt's 1776. All right, now what the hell does all this mean? That's just the whole gist of it there. Okay, so what we're going to do, this is a personal trust. Personal trust is a trust that a person creates for him or herself as the beneficiary. A personal trust can accomplish a variety of objectives. Personal trusts are separate legal entities that have the authority to buy, sell, hold, and manage property for the benefit of their trustor. So this is what I thoroughly believe is going on, and I've got a couple of sections that I can talk to you about with this. The all cap name in your social security number is considered a personal trust. It's actually a trust entity, and it's called a personal trust. Personal trust is a trust that a person creates for him or herself as the beneficiary. Okay? That means your person that was created, all cap name, turns into is converted or is created as a personal trust for the benefit of who? The bankers and the tripartite. Okay? The bankers and the tripartite. They're the ones funding everything. Now, a personal trust can accomplish a variety of objectives. Personal trusts are separate legal entities. Now, a personal trust can take many forms. I've already read this. They can be revocable or irrevocable, living or testamentary. They can fund education expenses. Oh, that sounds like a what? School tax? Meet special needs of beneficiaries, allow them to avoid, reduce estate taxes. It sounds like a banker's bailout. They can also be separate taxable entities or pass-through entities. Oh, okay, that sounds like U.S. Treasury. These entities pass their taxes through an individual income tax code rather than a corporate code. Oh, individual income tax return, 1040 form, social security number. Person may set up an irrevocable personal trust to pay for their own children's education. In this situation, the trustor would create the trust with the assets that he or she or he has set aside to seed the trust. Following this, she or he will usually seek the advice of a trust estate lawyer to complete the process, along with the custodians to hold the asset and potentially additional investment advisors. Additional investment advisors. Okay, so possibly talking about a NGO that's advising the states how to invest their bonds in the stock market. A trustor is an individual or organization that gifts funds or assets to others. The trustors do this by transferring his or her fiduciary duty to a third-party trustee who maintains the asset for the benefit of the beneficiaries. A trustor is an individual organization that gifts funds or assets to others. That would be you. Trustors do this by transferring his or her fiduciary duty to a third-party trustee, prosecutor, who maintains the assets for the benefit of the beneficiaries, investors in the bonds that were set down. Organization that gifts funds and assets to others. Under accepting gifts, 31 Code 3113, accepting gifts to provide people of the United States with an opportunity to make gifts to the United States government to be used to reduce public debt. The Secretary of the Treasury may accept for the government a gift of money made only on the condition that it be used to reduce public debt. An obligation of the government included in the public debt made only on the condition that the obligation be canceled or retired and not reissued. Other intangible, they're talking about intangible property here when they say other. Intangible personal property made only on the condition that the property is sold and the proceeds from the sale used to reduce public debt. Where does the public debt come from? Public debt comes from when the US Congress passes some kind of bill, and instead of raising your taxes to pay for it, they take it down 2 blocks down to the Federal Reserve, they hand it to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve writes them a check. Under credit, and for a nominal interest fee. Okay, now that public debt is now owed to the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve comes back and says, okay, so you've got used to reduce public debt. Public debt comes from US Congress. US Congress goes to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve comes back and says, you owe this debt to us, and it's considered public debt. Federal Reserve was created by the Bank of New York Mellon, who runs the stock market. So it's all tied together. So the bankers create an offshore trust called an Internal Revenue Trust back in 1936, I believe, 34, 36. They put your person in there as under U.S. territory, converted into a personal trust. Now everything is personal property instead of private property. So therefore, the term private property doesn't exist, which is number one, communist, and number two, it avoids having to deal with the military about confiscating private property. It didn't say anything about not confiscating personal property. Everything's a personal this, personal that, and individual. Separates all the people, no longer people, they're considered individuals. And it's all done under a personal trust. You go into a courtroom, judge pleads for you, all he's doing is acting as a trustee for your personal trust. He's not taking power of attorney, he's just listed as trustee. The trustee granted the independent judge that power under trustee status that the prosecutor is holding. So now you know why the judge keeps asking the prosecutor, what do you want to do? Where are we going with this? Because he's a trustee in the case. You're considered the trustor. That's somebody, you just gift shit to everybody. If it's under accepting gifts, guess what? No taxes are involved. This is a needle in the in a stack of needles trying to find something. But they get around, is very specific how they get around everything to where they can create a commercial obligation or commercial promise, get you to break it, and then sue you for it. I'll show you where that is in just a few minutes. Secretary shall redeem a direct obligation of the government bearing interest or sold on discount basis on receiving it when the obligation is given to the government. Sounds like a bond. becomes a property of a government under conditions of a trust. There you go. Is payable to the death of the owner to the government or to the officer of the government, an officer's official capacity. If the gift or transfer to the government is subject to a gift or inheritance tax, the secretary shall pay the tax out of the proceeds of redemption. So you go in and you start reading some of their acts, some of the acts of where this actually came from. It's called the Trust Indenture Act. And this was done in 1939, and it's directly in dealing with the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. They have it right here. Okay. It says the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 and otherwise disclosed and ascertained is hereby declared that the national public interest and the interest of investors in notes, bonds, debentures, evidences of indebtedness, and certificates of interest or participation therein, which are offered to the public, are adversely affected. The obligor fails to provide a trustee to protect and enforce the rights and to represent the interests of such investors, notwithstanding the fact that individual action by such investors for the purpose of protecting and enforcing their rights is rendered impracticable by reason of the disproportionate expense of taking such action. It costs too much to file on you. Concerted action by investors in their common interest through representatives of their own selection is impeded by reason of wide dispersion of such investors through many states, and by reason of the fact that information as to the names and addresses of such investors generally is not available to such investors. Okay. When the trustee does not have adequate rights and powers or adequate duties and responsibilities in connection with matters relating to the protection and enforcement of the rights of such investors. When notwithstanding the obstacles to concerted action by such investors and the general and reasonable assumption by such investors that the trustee is under any affirmative duty to take action for the protection and enforcement of their rights. Trust indentures. Okay, so basically what you're looking at, folks, is you're looking at a prosecutor who is representing the investors and or bankers, which would be a state within a state. They're coming after your personal trust, and you have not been named a trustee and or have not named any beneficiaries to your person. And since that has taken place, it allows the prosecutor to claim that you're the trustor. You're the one you're the one at the courtroom giving gifts. And then he's the trustee of the investors who are the beneficiaries. He gives limited trustee status over to the judge to keep the whole situation going. And it does this on every specific case. I didn't say you didn't need to stop making your claims. Don't forget to keep making your claims. You might want to go in and read the Trust Indenture Act of 1939. It's very interesting. It's only 36 pages. It tells you, if all the specifics on basically everything. All right, if we're going too quickly for you, don't worry, you can play the tape over and over again. Not a problem. All right, this is what we got. The law discriminates between gifts and exchanges in odd and interesting ways. A promisee can sue to enforce an ordinary commercial promise, but not a promise to give a gift. So therefore, the creditor cannot sue himself. Let me explain that. When you're going into a mortgage agreement, you're the promisor, okay? And they're the promisee. You're giving a gift. You're giving your promissory note to the bank. It goes into an account. They write a check off of it. Then they go and find investors. Now the bank is representing the investors, not you. And it also is now they can't tax a gift, but they can come after a commercial promise. Then they tack on a mortgage agreement, which is a commercial promise. So you give them the money, and then they in the beginning, which they didn't have anything before, you just gave it to them under a promissory note, and then tack on a commercial promise for you to pay for the next 30 years. Commercial promise is also a statute. It's also an act of Congress. That's a commercial promise because they're dealing in commerce and interstate commerce all the time. So, and also intra, depending on the state. So, what you're doing here is a statute is a commercial promise. They can sue you for a commercial promise, but they can't sue you, but not a promise to give a gift. How many times have you been told, do you promise to pay this by next month, by the 15th of next month? Do you promise to pay this? Pay the fine. That, but not a promise to give a gift. That's considered a gift. You were found guilty of violating the commercial promise, the statute. So you can do this all day long. All you got to do is come up with some kind of crap in the media, come up with a new commercial promise in an act, have the bankers Congress pass it, which creates another commercial promise on you. And then if you violate it, you violated the commercial promise. Now you have to show up to court when you're found guilty of the commercial promise, violating the commercial promise. Now you give them a gift. It converts back and forth. You're giving them a gift, and that's tax-free. You're the trustor in that situation. The prosecutor is trustee. Investors are because they create a bond on every case. The investors are the beneficiaries. So it's a constant loop. They've got you looped. And it starts with the Internal Revenue Trust, and your person is converted. It goes along with the birth certificate, live birth. So there's a live person there. There's a trustor. Blah 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 blah. It goes on and on. And you come in as your person comes in under a personal trust situation, and now they sue your personal trust. It's trustee against trustor. So all Sarah did was she said the trustee of the person is here. She claimed trustee position, and the beneficiaries have already been named, and it's not the investors that the prosecutor was representing as trustee. He had nowhere to go, because if the people figured out how the banking system was set up in this country, there'd be a revolution by tomorrow morning.
I believe that was stated by Henry Ford back in the 30s.
That's right.
Yep. If people knew what we were doing to them, we'd have a revolution tomorrow.
So you see, folks, your person is not secure. It's been converted to a personal trust. That's why you have personal property, individual tax forms, personal this, personal that, your personal privacy. If you're the trustor, they're just there to give gifts. The prosecutor's acting as trustee. He's named beneficiaries that you're going to help give to the beneficiaries, your labor and whatever else it costs, because the beneficiaries started the commercial promise in the first place when they created the act, and then state statutes were created under that act. So they got you coming and they got you going. They create this liability, that liability. The more people wake up, the faster they go to a communist government. And the reason why they want to go to a communist government is to shut everybody up and make it to where you can't object to this voluntary compliance system. That's what they're doing. They have to make sure they force you into voluntary compliance. You want me to say that 3 times quick? They're going to force you into voluntary compliance. So that's what's going on here. The reason why they don't have any your intangible property rights transferred over to them is because you're the trustor of the personal trust that they set up for you. The bankers set this up for you, and they said, "Oh, this is for your benefit." Not really, because they convert it back and forth anytime they want. Did you guys vote in for a bank bailout? No. Did you vote to bail out the car companies? No. They're the beneficiaries. You're only called a beneficiary when you're asking for benefits. You're only called that when it suits them. Just the same as you're considered a U.S. citizen every time time comes around. Other than that, you're an alien, a resident alien. You don't have any rights of a U.S. citizen, which I don't even think there is any. So, folks, if you have a personal trust, meaning your person is a personal trust, I didn't say you set that up. I said they set it up. And this document here is nothing more than altruism, status, and trust in the law of gifts and gratuitous promises. It's a nice little doc. I'll put this underneath the video when I upload it. And it teaches you to understand law of treatment of gifts and gratuitous promises and all that kind of stuff. It goes into a lot of this stuff. And there's only 45 pages to read if you want to get into it, and things you can do. So we didn't say go in and just start fighting them. Oh, that's fraud. That's this. That's that. All she had to do. She didn't have to pick up a gun. She didn't have to yell at anybody. She didn't have to threaten anybody. All she had to do was say, the trustee of the person is here, and the beneficiaries have already been named. That's all she had to say. Case gone. They want to dismiss the case. Case dismissed. You're free to go. Have a good day. Because they're not going to work for no money. And if they're not going to do this isn't about justice. This is about money. They're not going to, they have what do you call it? So much allegiance to their own country, and they really give a shit about your country that if once the money dries up, they're gone. That's how it works. Because they have so much allegiance, and they're all for justice, right?
Yep. And they're definitely not going to let it come to court and expose what they're doing.
Okay, so this kind of goes along with what we're talking about here, because this law, the law of gifts and gratuitous promises, is also in England and the United States. And they'll talk about this or they'll talk about that, but you have to realize, you have to understand, somewhat about trust in order to really get what they're doing. That all she had to do declare in open court that she was the trustee of the person, and the beneficiaries have already been named. And that was it. That's all she had to do. Okay, so we'll just do a brief recap on everything now. So what I'm going to tell you is this: you have a bunch of bankers that came in and they want to run the world under a world communist revolution. They have to have a way to fund it. They're saying that the national debt is 21 trillion, and they're boasting 28 trillion in assets. I think 32 now. How do you get that many assets in such a short period of time? Now they're going to say, "Oh, the bank's over 200 years old." Doesn't matter. How do you get that many assets and be able to keep them? You have to cheat. It's the same as when you have a bank, and the bank starts out in a freaking trailer, a mobile home. Sometimes they're what do you call them? Modular homes. 6 months, they've got an enormous building. Someone's cheating. And others will come in and say, oh, that's just laundering money. No, that's not just laundering money. That's a lot of people gifting a lot of things. Then you got to set up a religion, so they'll use Moloch, okay, some devil or something, just to they can get away with what they're getting away with, and they can gift babies and children and everybody else to Moloch there. Okay, so you go into a courtroom, and you're obviously the trustor. You're there to give some gifts away. You're there as Santa Claus. Okay, you're there to give gifts. They brought you in there under some commercial obligation that you didn't even have any idea or any reason to believe it should be passed. You didn't have an oath to their legislature. You don't have a bond to their legislature. You're just there bearing gifts. The trustee over there in the office of the prosecutor, he's got investors that he's got to look out for that invested in the bond that they created on your violation of the commercial obligation that you or commercial promise that you had nothing to do with. You didn't know that your person was offshore and then converted into a personal trust, and that everything now is all personal property rather than private property to avoid any international law violation of confiscating private property. They even go as far as to call it a gift because they don't want to call it confiscation or seizing. So all the assets of the bank at the 28 trillion, that's basically on their records was gifted to them by you. You just didn't know it. Then they'll come back and say, oh, ignorance of the law is no excuse. No, non-disclosure is an excuse. Because it was the banker that created the commercial promise in the first place through the Internal Revenue Trust, attached it to your person, your personal trust that's been converted into a personal trust, made you obligated towards it to fulfill it that you didn't know about. The cop goes around, catches you violating it, your commercial promise. They create a bond, go back into the court, convert you to a trustor now. They're the trustee, they got a beneficiary, and the judge just sits there as an independent judiciary with limited trust functions coming from the prosecutor.
Yeah, power of attorney.
No, not even power of attorney. It's just limited trust obligations. I thought it would be power of attorney, but it wasn't.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that definition for you.
All right.
So
He makes you plead there, and you get thrown into a freaking loop. And it's a box that you get thrown into so they can extract assets. It has nothing to do with justice. It has nothing to do with making the streets safe. It has nothing to do with anything other than they're going to grab as many assets as they possibly can so they can put together their world communist government. And that's all this is all about. And I'm not even going through the list of frauds that are involved in this because there are too many to mention. We can start out with Title 18. All of it, the whole title. And go from there. Anything you wanted to add, John?
No, sir. That's everything that I can think of right now, Keith.
Okay. All right. Anything you want to add, Todd?
Nope. I think we got her.
Okay, so there you go. Your person is when actually don't think that you can actually become the trustee and beneficiary of that person and start trying to move in on that little deal there. Okay, that's what a lot of people are going to try to do. These are some fair warnings. If you're the
Mhm.
trustee of the person and the beneficiaries have already been named, walk away. You try to
There's
get in,
no,
you try to hone in on this loop trying to get the money,
and they will lock you up.
they will, yeah, they'll do that. Further, that'll get you killed.
Yes, it will.
These are mafia guys. Okay? That's it. They're mafia. Actually, a little less than mafia. And they don't play games. Don't use this. Please do not use this information to try to fill your pockets. It's not going to work. Best place is neutral. Oh, I'm the trustee of the person and the beneficiaries have already been named. That's it. The man backs down, walks away. You go away and don't say another word. Just walk away. Go live your life. Study as much as you can. And people in dealing with children, product of human conception. There's your hint. They're just moving products around. Start looking up personal trusts and the acts that we discussed here, and you'll see exactly what we're talking about. It may take you a little while to understand it, but that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. It may take you a little while, but it is what it is. The warrants are based on commercial promises that you had nothing to do with in the first place. Don't know what else we can tell you, folks, but that's what they call the way this all goes and the way this has been set up. Thanks for listening to the 106th broadcast of the T Row Show. We will talk to you next week.